So, okay, let's start. Welcome everyone to our monthly ICG Lab Talk series. It's a great pleasure to introduce Çağatay Turkay to you. Çağatay is a lecturer in applied data science at the City University London. Çağatay did his bachelor's and master's study in Turkey. He did his master's study at Sabancı University in Istanbul, and then he moved to University of Bergen to the visualization group there to finish his PhD. That took him until 2013, and afterwards he moved to the G Center at City University London. Yeah, Çağatay is mainly concerned with the integration between visualization and data analysis, and this mostly with respect to high-dimensional data and temporal data. Okay, Çağatay, we're looking forward to an interesting talk, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks you. Thanks. This is a virtual floor that I'm taking for the first time, so thanks for the invitation, and thanks for the nice introduction, Mark. As Mark briefly said, that I am looking at the integration of interactive visual methods with computational analysis technologies or methodologies. And today I want to talk a little bit about the use of interactive visual analysis methods to sort of, as my title implies, to aid data-informed analytical problem solving. And one of the critical things is, first of all, the interactive visual analysis. That's sort of the types of techniques we try to use in our research, but also the data-informed aspect, which I would like to touch upon during my talk. So, as Mark sort of said, I'm now in the GI Center at University of London. We are a group at the moment of 6 academics and several PhD students and postdocs. We look at like the use of visualization, interaction in addressing analytical data-related problems. We work in different domains, from transport, from geographical data analysis to sort of biological data analysis. So work on a couple of different sort of subjects, and here are the colleagues that I usually work with every day. And my research is mainly on what could be classified commonly as visual analytics, which I will also talk a bit about today, and then the ways to integrate computational tools within visualization, within the visual analytics process. And I've done a bit more on the perceptually optimized visualization as well, in addition to this, but mainly in this interactive visual methodologies. And I've worked in several domains, currently working in intelligence transport, and then looking in a new project with cybersecurity. So domain-wise, the techniques we developed we aim them to be generalizable, to be applicable to several different domains. But today is mainly about this interactive visual data analysis methods that I've been working on, and I would like to go through some sort of the challenges we face, and followed by a couple of examples afterwards from our own research. So to start with, this is a sort of a general intro to what I mean with data-informed science. So this is a topic that has been being discussed and being sort of a point of discussion recently, because there was a move initially when data-intensive research has been sort of becoming popular, that in those type of domains, which like in biology, medicine, astronomy, like even psychology, that where we see more and more use of data. That initially there were sounds that were saying data-driven research or data-driven science. So what I would like to sort of briefly sort of argue today is that we, rather than a data-driven science that's based only on data-driven observations, we still need the ideas and the hypothesis first. That underlying truth about the way we the research and the way science is executed has not changed with the extreme availability of data. But what we now see is in all the scientific practices, we have new mechanisms, new ways, and new availability of data that is informing the way we do science. And this is a topic of research in many scientific fields that are sort of trying to improve this link between the analyst and the scientist and the data. And there's a lot of work in visualization. Of course, there is a lot of work in data mining, machine learning, statistics. So, but all these works, all these different domains are sort of aiming to sort of support the scientists to inform, or support the analysts to inform their decisions, inform their observations through data. But of course, this process that's based on data has come with lots of challenges. So I just want to walk through a couple of them. There are many other challenges, but I just want to sort of highlight some of them that sort of motivated us in our research. The first one is that the heterogeneity and the multi-scalar aspect of the data sources that we have. This is so apparent now in the data sets that we use, because we all whatever the field, I mean, we see this becoming an issue, because we whatever the domain, the data sources are now more variable. We are gathering or collecting data from several sources, and these data sets, they have very different properties. Some are sort of the conventional type. They look like tables, like you have attributes, rows, etc. This is very common, but most of the time you have several of them, several of these tables. Some are maybe linked, maybe not linked. So this is becoming an issue, how to sort of develop techniques that will handle all this variation. But on top of that, there is a lot of additional inherent properties of this data. Now we are saying there are networks, where there are relations between these items, there are relations between these attributes, or the network itself is the basis of the data, and then there's a lot of associated table around it. There's also geometrical aspects where there's most of the time there's a positional, let's say, perspective to this data, which makes things more complex, which I will also talk through a couple of examples. Then also there is this textual modalities, which are very different to deal with conventional methods that we use. And we, along also this complexity, we see that there are lots of scales that things are happening that people are trying to understand. This is a sort of a great example that shows a couple of scales of a system of our body, and then we see that we have from the very high level organs, from the lung level, you can go to all the way to the molecular level, and all of these different levels have some degree of interaction between them. But analyzing and understanding and making these multi-scalar links from one scale to the other is a quite complex task. And just, I mean, this is just to summarize that the computational methodologies we have, they don't work always with all these types of data. They don't work in all these scales of data. And it's cognitively and perceptually a very hard task to sort of link all these this multiple sort of resolutions and multiple availability of data. And more we see that people are using data that's sort of out there and available to support their research. And in those cases, data is not even linked to that data, or has not been gathered for the purpose of using that research. So there are other problems to think about. The second one is the breadth of data. So people are talking mainly about when they refer to big data, which is a sort of a term that has been picked up quite popularly. But data is not only big in terms of the rows it has, but it's now becoming more and more columns it has. I mean, it's a nice example that I like that we worked on with our collaborators. These are the columns of a 2D table. So this was about 400 of something variables. That is not at all amazingly high number, but still it creates a big challenge. You see that it's, I mean, where it stopped now, we have some comes with lots of zeros, some comes with integers, some floating points, and all needs to be taken care of separately, because this information is not coherent. There's a lot of complexity in the data that's coming with the form of the data. In addition to that, the models that you build in such wide tables with lots of features, with lots of information, becomes very hard to interpret and very hard to explain. And then the findings become less reliable because there are lots of assumptions that are not met by computational tools. There's a lot of uncertainty. And some of it is especially in this particular context, some people like to use the term the curse of dimensionality, which is being used in all different senses. But that's another challenge. And the data is another to add on that is that the data is never perfect. So this is a nice sort of quote from the paper by Kendall and his colleagues, where they interviewed lots of data analysts. And although this is coming from let's say from a business domain, it tells a lot about the process, the challenges that people go through. And here the analyst's comment is that more than half of the time is spent on getting the data ready for analysis, and this sort of eats up all the time to do the real stuff, which is oops, what happened? This is a big wrong key pressed. So this is this problem with the imperfections in the data and the way the effort that needs to go there is another big challenge. And another important one is that these concepts and the data sets are dynamic and things are changing. So I assume most of you have heard the Google success with the Google flu predictions. They were by looking at what people are searching on the net, by sort of analyzing that data. Google claimed in around 2009 that they could predict an outbreak before it happened, and they were even better than the health authorities at the time. But then things changed. By 2013, they were the models stopped working. They were being criticized by just oversimplifying the problem, and then the model was not performing well because the search behavior has changed and things have changed. So the model was not able to sort of adapt or pick it up because it was not essentially only based on theory or concepts, but also, a bit maybe too much data-driven. And this is sort of another alert that we should be careful about how to use data in science. And another challenge that we face is generating plausible and useful hypotheses by just looking at data. This is a nice example that I like. There's a lot of nice charts on this web page. It's called Spurious Correlations. Probably you've heard of it. Here we have, for instance, two timelines. The green one is per capita consumption of cheese, and the blue one is number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets. So if you make your assumptions on data, and if you sort of, let's say, as many say, if you drive your understanding just solely on data, you might think that this relationship exists. That's a sort of a viable relation to pick up and use. But that's most of the time not enough. So you need to sort of dig deep, and understand whether what the data is telling you is sort of makes sense or relevant. That's where the theory and then the domain knowledge really is required. So I would like to sort of finish this challenge list with a sort of a nice quote from our collaborators that we work on in a recent project. So these are social scientists which we are trying to help with visual ways to look at their data. So they have lots of data to understand how and why people respond to surveys, and when they do, what sort of demographic characteristics they have. So I will not talk about the project, but one thing that's important as a message that we receive from them is that they not only need the models, the data-based, data-driven models, but they need to understand the models very well, and they want to be able to explain these models, because it's very important that they can defend those models when they go to a conference or when they publish those data based observations to their peers, to the other scientists, in full confidence. I mean, I just highlighted a couple of things here, is that it's the biggest role of these data-driven research and science, that we should give methods to be able to whoever is using them to be able to understand and explain what the data is telling, and improve the confidence and sort of reliance in these models. So that's sort of a good motivation and to do in our task. And to be able to do that, we need to sort of give ways to facilitate existing theories and concepts, which we often refer to as domain knowledge, and we need ways to sort of give tools for the users, tools for the analysis to use their existing knowledge, and we should provide several perspectives concurrently so that they do a multi-perspective full analysis on things, and the solutions should be able to sort of generate, compare, evaluate, and iteratively improve lots of hypotheses and ideas flexibly. So this is sort of at a very high level what's sort of informing, what's motivating our research in visual analysis, because we think that visual analysis or visual data analysis can help with these challenges, can help to do some of these tasks. So assuming that most of you have heard about like all these ideas around visualization, visual analytics, and listened to several talks, so I will not talk so much about it. But one definition I like of visualization is from Tamara Munzner, who recently wrote this amazing book, and there her definition says computer-based visualization systems provide visual representation of data sets designed to help people to carry out tasks more efficiently. So two aspects that's sort of important for the types of research we do, types of methods we develop, is that it's data sets and people, and then we always think about and consider these two aspects when we think about how we design a solution. And from visualization, what we do is that we know that people alone, or the visualization alone, may not be able to tackle all these challenges and all these problems. And there is a lot of great research happening on non-visual side of research, like the machine learning, statistics, data mining. And the way we try to address that is get the bulk of research. There's a lot of great research happening there. Can we get the most support from these computational, not necessarily visual methods, combine it with the capabilities of the human through visualization and through interactive visual methods to achieve sort of better methods that will address all these challenges. Of course, this is very much in line with what visual analytics agenda has been saying, and I've just some of the main books that highlight those motivations. So what I will do now is to sort of how we do these, how we address these motivations, how we go through this in our own research. And I want to walk through a couple of examples, some recent, some actually one with that we have done earlier with Mark. So I'll talk about these projects that we did and try to touch upon the different challenges that I've just talked about. The first one is where we looked at multivariate geographical data. This is from a work that we published at InfoVis 2014. And here the challenge is that there is data like census, demographic data from 2 years, from 2001 and 2011, and there's a lot of there's around 200,000, 200K, 1,800, 180,000 output areas. An output area is basically a data point, which is a combination, statistically a combined version of 40 households in a way. And then we have this data that's covering all the UK for 41 different indicators. So we have 41 different variables for all these data points that covers the whole country. And And these 41 indicators are on different geodemographic classification sort of values, like how much percentage of the people are living in detached houses, about their, like, what information about their employment, like are they working in agriculture, are they working in catering, etc. Are they using transport, are they using sort of do they have more than 2 cars, etc. Lots of different indicators about different aspects of social life. And the task here is, the problem here is that we have lots of these variables that they show different characteristics over space, which is another aspect, which is a 2D, let's say, as this relates to the first challenge, that it's this data is dispersed over space, and they show different characteristics over where you look at things. And on top of that, it's changing over time. So it's a spatial-temporal data that has 41 channels varying differently over space. So it's in a way, it's a sort of not a simple problem to sort of right away model, because of all these different facets that we need to look at concurrently. So in order to address that, we built methods to interactively generate visual summaries of the data that are generated in response to the user's user's decision on what to vary and how to sort of analyze the data. So I'll just walk through what we do, how we create these visual attributes over an example. So this, I mean, before I maybe go through that, so what we are trying to build is already on this slide on the right. So on the green one, the user makes some selection that's sort of relevant for the analysis, and on the right side we have little visual summaries of that are generated in response to the user's input in a way. So what I will walk you through now is an example of how we generate one of these visual summaries. So of course what we want to analyze is on a map, and then let's assume for simplicity now that we want to understand how a single attribute varies over the geography. Let's say we picked up unemployment rates, and we want to look at how things are varying from southwest England to southeast England. So we say, I want to sort of investigate the unemployment rates along this axis of variation, and this is user defined, and this is because that's relevant for addressing a particular question. So what we start to do is that once this axis of analysis, axis of variation is defined interactively, we start we trigger some computations in the background. So what we do is that we run almost a sort of a local statistics kernel in a way that computes the statistics for the unemployment rate for this first box of selection. And what we do is that we assign a baseline and compare the local statistics around this area to the country average. So in our case, the baseline is the country average. So the first point that we computed was above the country average, so it ended up above this baseline. The second point, the unemployment rates around this region was around country average, so it landed very more or less on the baseline. And we continue this process to generate more and more statistics, local statistics over the axis defined by the user. So the next one is a sort of a well-off area where the unemployment rates are quite low compared to the country average, so that sort of ends up being there. And then this goes on like this. And then the result of this process is a sort of dynamically generated visual summary for a single attribute, in this case for the unemployment rate. And this, the yellow visualization is a visual summary of what the user has sort of defined as an area of interest. So we create, of course, one for each of these attributes. If you remember, we had 41 of those, and this gives us this sort of visual summaries over space. So let me run this sort of video, and in this one, what we do is that we want to trace the coastal towns of Southwest England, and then we want to look at how these 41 different variables respond to this selection sequence. So these are also, of course, linked to each other, and then these visual summaries are sort of generated, and once the user is sort of hovering over with the mouse on these small multiples, it's also highlighting where that statistics has been computed on the map, and vice versa. When the user is on the map, it's also highlighting on the map. So you can, of course, also sort them according to similarities to sort of to understand, to analyze this data quickly. So if we look at what happened on that chase over the coastal towns, we see that there are, and then order them according to similarity. So we interactively select one of them, and all of them are ordered according to similarity of these traces. So we see that we here the green one we highlight is a small fishing town called Linton. It's a small town where agriculture and fishing activity is high, where people are living in detached houses, because this is, as you can see, there is a high value for these detached houses, and many people are working in hotel and catering, and in those areas, typical to that smallish towns, that you have low population density compared to the country average. So by quickly just tracing a line along a line of interest, and then inspecting these different variables over this let's say geographical trace that we generate, we managed to see this multivariate relationships quickly. And of course, when you draw this line in somewhere else in the country, these relations will be completely different, because these such geodemographic characteristics and the dynamics between them vary with where they are, really. So that's quite it's sort of a big search space that we are sort of trying to address here. So we do a similar test with time. So what we do is that since we have data from 2001 and 2011, this time the difference, so we made a trace from West London to East London, that's on top. And then the visual summaries are now showing the differences between two time steps for this location between these 2 years. So the baseline in the previous one were country average, but in this one it's the difference between these two years in that for that particular location for all the 41 variables. So what we see is that in the west of London, so which is a sort of more established part of the city, there hasn't been much change in the demographic characteristics. So that's why we are seeing a lot of the lines attached to the baseline. But as we move towards the east, which is like the right of all these small multiple views, we see that things are changing. So there is a lot of different activity that on the eastern side of the city, because this has been very dynamic. There's been a lot of change in the last 10 years. So there are lots of more foreign bonds. There's less manufacturing, more or less all across the country, and then the private rent, people like living in private rent has increased more than it did in the west of the city. So this sort of gives an idea how dynamic the east side is basically. This, by the way, this where I am, because I can't really tell. I'm not living in London for 10 years, but in the 2 years that I've been living in this London, it's changing so rapidly. So I'm sort of observing, living these changes as every day. So we took this research also a bit further, and we looked at, like last year, we continue looking at the different aspects that you might find, how the different statistics they might vary. We looked at it a bit more systematically, how the relations between the variables, they might change over the different scales that you look at things, and over the different geography that you might look at things. or through different parameters that you might use when you do some correlation analysis as well. So we come up with this very colorful sort of images, but let me try to explain very briefly what we thought when we come up with these ones. So the idea started off from the other work that things change differently in local regions. So if you look at correlation relations between two aspects, in this example, I'm using a data set of gas consumption versus electricity consumption. If you look at the correlation between gas consumption and electricity consumption, if you use data from the whole country, that will give you a number for sure. Let's say in this one it's minus 0.32. But since like similar things are sort of have similar properties, running a global correlation function for the whole data, it doesn't always make sense because there are lots of local variations that you just aggregate and smooth over. So you might want to capture those local variations. So that's why there are these techniques called adaptive moving windows, where you compute sort of correlation relationships. You look at the local neighborhood of each data point and you compute lots of local correlations. So that's what we investigated systematically. So when you look at when you consider for each data point the 100 closest neighborhood points, when you compute a sort of a correlation measure, you get such an image. So which is sort of quite different. So the first one is the leftmost one is the global one, and that's same for everyone, same for all these regions. The second one, we have an N, the 100 neighbors. That's a different image. And when you do it for more local computations, for 50 to 25, you get a different image. So this is a sort of a sign, and then we observed that again and again, is that it's things are changing the way you look at things, at the scale you look at things. That's another level of complexity we try to understand. And we saw that this is a sign that is in South England. So we see the electricity consumption and gas consumption are sort of negatively correlated, whereas in London they are positively correlated. So they are quite different. But when you average things, you lose all these details. So we systematically looked into these aspects to support analysts doing this type of analysis to understand the variations in the data or the correlation relations in the data. And we see that there is a lot of variation, a lot of change. And here visualization and interactive visual analysis helps us to look at this variation concurrently and over different parameters. So we sort of, let's say, improved the classical scatter plot metrics, where you look at multiple variants with lots of small maps, aggregated small maps, where we vary these parameters systematically. So so now this is another work that I want to sort of quickly touch upon, is the use of visualization and interactive use of computations and statistics in the analysis of groups and clusters. So this is one work that we did earlier together with Mark and Alex and others, where we used the Kaleido tool that I'm sure all of you know very well. So here our goal was to understand, to further characterize why we see groups and why, when we have a group and we have a cluster of let's say of patients, let's say in this case with cancer patients, and then we have, if the algorithm finds us some subgroups of these patients, can we characterize and can we understand these groups better through the use of visualization and interaction? So that was our sort of main goal. So I'm just assuming that you have seen Kaleido, at least in the ones in the room have seen Kaleido, but and then how this particular view works. But in this one, a cancer subtype is a group of patients that share a sort of a common cancer subtype, and this is often dependent on a particular activity in a particular number of genes, a particular mutations, or a combinations of these gene activity or mutations in these samples. So in this visualization, we have each block block is a group of patients, and then the color is that they're sort of they include heat maps, and then these heat maps are sort of showing gene activity within this group. So in this pipeline, like there are several ways to group your data. There are several ways to sort of get different results of grouping, and this might come from clinical data, this might come from a clustering algorithm, and you might end up with several clustering results to look at, several groups to look at. But then the task is, how do these overlap, and how do these relate to each other, and how can you characterize and understand these groups better? So in the visualization that Mark and Alex developed earlier, that's in the Stratomex one. So this type of visualization was used. So here we have two different groupings, two different clusterings, and when there are many, and these are groups of patients, and then as you can see, these have different heat maps, which means that this consists of different sets of genes showing different activity. So here, if two groups is sharing lots of data points, sharing lots of patients, we see a thicker ribbon between them that's highlighted with this orange one. So this tells us about how much overlap between the two sort of classes, two groups. But if we want to sort of know a little bit more about how the genes overlap, this doesn't tell much. I mean, you could try to sort of look at the heat maps and try to sort of compare them along the columns, because columns are different gene activity. But as you can imagine, this is not a very easy task. So that's how we were motivated, because understanding why we see these groups is tightly related to understanding what are these activities that are specific for a particular group. So we used sort of a statistics-based, statistics-driven approach that we called the dual analysis approach that we developed earlier. In this representation, in this approach, one can create different representations based on statistics. Assume that you have let's say a heat map gene activity like this, a 2D gene activity matrix. So the duality here is that you can basically create statistics along the rows, and you can create statistics along the columns. But the way depending on how you create these statistics, which axis you look at things, you either create a visualization of samples or a visualization of a single gene. So on the left, we created mean, and let's say for simplicity, I'm using mean and standard deviation in this case. On the left, on the yellow background, we create a visualization where each dot is a single sample, and we create a mean and standard deviation along each row of this 2D matrix, expression matrix. And on the right, with the bluish greenish background, we create statistics for each column, for each gene. So each dot represents a gene in this one. So these are representing two different genes. So let's say the one on the right side, on the gene visualization, maybe you can notice that there's one outlier on the corner which has a very high mean and a lot of variation. So that is maybe a gene that has maybe there is some problem in the readings, or there is a special gene to be sort of treated separately. So what we did is that to use this technique, to use this idea, and then try to sort of integrate it within Kaleido, within Stratomex, and use these visualizations as a means to represent the most dominant characteristic genes for a group of patients. So we used this, what we call the significance difference view. In order to generate that, we looked at that, like assume that we have a subset of patients, in this case a block of patients, and we have like two subsets, a blue subset of patients and a red subset of patients in this one. So what you could do is that you could compute these statistics, let's say again mean and standard deviation, only for the blue one and only for the red group. So this will give you two sets of these data sets for the red group and the blue group. And what you can do, you can generate a visualization of difference this time, how much the statistics for the genes are changing for these two different groups. So this gives you something we call the difference view. So if a point, and in this case the points are genes, if a point is on this cross section of these two axes, it means that there is no difference for that gene for these two groups. And if it's to the left, it means that for these genes, the values are lower for those genes. And if it's to the right, the expression values are higher for those genes. And then we also computed the statistical significance of these of the differences between these genes. Although statistical significance is losing its popularity these days, it's not sort of assumed as a sort of a valid go-to method anymore, not as much as it was before, but we still use those significance threshold to highlight those genes where there's a significant difference for a group of patients. And then we included in stratomics like this. So what you can do is that you can select within a block, instead of a heat map, now we have these difference views, and they are sort of summarizing the different gene activity for the specifically for that group. So each block is a different group, and then for that group, it is showing how what genes are showing a different activity level for the participants of that group, or the members of this group. So we can quickly, what we do by these selections, let's say on the left one, luminal A underexpressed gene, let's say that we selected those ones. Those ones that are lowly expressed, those genes that are lowly expressed for luminal A are highly expressed for a basal-like. So the second one, I'm not sure, I don't think my mouse will be showing, but in the left side, on the left side of this one, so lowly expressed genes for one group are highly expressed for the other group. That's a sort of a clue for us that how to characterize these groups even further, how to sort of to comment on the reasons why we see these clusters. So visualization through these interactive selections are informing our understanding of these groups. So we are taking, by this combination, we are taking the next step of understanding why the algorithm grouped these things together, because in the first one, they have low expression values, whereas in the second one, they have higher expression values. And this information is easily and available through interactive selections. So that's the sort of the way we envisage these things. So we took on the sort of a last sort of a small sort of note to how we use visualization along this line. We took this idea of summarizing or building characterical or summarizing representations of groups over spatiotemporal data. In a recent project where we look at crime data, we created these representations which summarizes the data over not only sort of activity, not only numerical data, but also over space, time, and the attributes they carry. So so we try to come up with visual representations that one can interactively vary. Like if you have three different perspectives you want to investigate your data, in this case, space, time, and description, can we come up with different visual representations that will show for a collection of data that will show how the data is distributed over space, how the data is distributed over time, and how the data is distributed over description. And of course, if you want to lay these 3 layers of information on top of each other, this becomes quite a hard task because it's 3 channels being communicated at the same time. So we try to come up with different abstraction levels on which you see on the left side to sort of represent this information. So what we ended up with are this type of visualizations where each one is a group of in this one, I think these are sort of traffic incidents. Well, the first one is like car crashes, the other one is pedal cycle crashes, etc. And then we sort of overlaid these 3 different perspectives concurrently to provide a more comprehensive understanding of this data. So I'll just skip over the video. So in all these examples, all these different sort of research projects, what we try to do is to use multiple linked views, like linked data sets, and then try to bring several perspectives from several different data sets. And we always try to improve the interpretation of these multiple facets. And we always try to integrate computational results and computational methods within the interaction, within like linked to the interaction mechanisms. And we always try to support this iterative, fast-paced idea prototyping process where analysts hopefully converge to a sort of a more well-informed, easy to justify sort of findings and observations. And we use interaction and visualization as a medium to facilitate this process. So as in general, what we have observed in our research is that visualization becomes a very important and good tool to sort of answer how and why type of questions. So like why is this a cluster? How do these genomes overlap? And whenever you want to answer these well-informed questions, visualization is sort of playing an important role, which may not be sort of readily available from just a computational output. So for those type of questions, we are seeing more and more, and then that visualization might play interactive visualization might play a role. A couple of lessons learned that I'm just looking through whether anything that I haven't said so much is that in all these problems, of course, we have seen that it's all relates to the problems, all are informed by data coming from our users. We need to show them solutions to the problems that might be answered by data, and we use those as evidences to earn their trust in these research projects. And what we observe is that all these methods improve the reliability and interpretability of the algorithmic outputs and all the data-informed observations that they made. And to sort of finalize, and one thing that what we are seeing being requested more and more is that people are not only after predictive models or statistically or let's say predictive-wise useful models, but they want more and more explanatory models based on data. So if you remember what our collaborators said initially, this code that they want data-driven or data-informed observations that they can understand, that they can defend to their peers. So there is a focus now answering this how and why questions with data, and we see that there is more and more central role, of course, for scientists, researchers, and analysts who know how to use this data, who know how to use the tools to analyze this data, and our vision is of course that more and more people are going to use visualization and interactive visualization as a medium to sort of use these computation analysis methods and also like drive new insight that they were not able to do before. So with this, I would like to thank a couple of people. I mean, there are several, some of them in that room over there, and then I've worked with several like great scientists along in these projects. And with this, I would like to thank you for listening. And if you have questions, happy to take them. Thanks.
Okay, thanks so much, Çağatay. Could someone turn the lights on, please? Oh, very dark. Any questions?
I have a question. So,
yeah.
Thank you for your talk. I would like to know, because you had it now the conclusion, how, or can you give an example how you encode uncertainty of attributes over time? Because you mentioned this at the end, but I haven't seen anything like this in your last example for where you had the 3 layers with the geospatial data, with the time and the attributes, or the description as you call it.
Yeah.
For example, also in the first where you had the smaller multiples with the yellow views, how would you encode the uncertainty?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's uncertainty is coming up and up again in our research as something that our sort of collaborators are sort of requesting in a way. So one, I mean, in those examples, I can't say there is within the examples I have there's a great sort of notion of uncertainty representation. But what we did, at least in this in this work, is to represent the uncertainty in the statistics. We use this circular statistics. So if you look at this one, the middle layer is about time. It's a visual representation of time and how much there is sort of, I mean, that's maybe a very limited understanding of uncertainty or very limited representation of uncertainty. But what we do here along the time axis is that, let's say, we are aggregating the data points into sort of temporal bins, and in the top one, which looks very abstract and very simple, we used circular statistics, and then there is this circular. I mean, it's a type of, it's very similar to the typical descriptive statistics, but specialized for temporal data, which is following a circular pattern. These statistics are also making use of that. The closest uncertainty representation we have for time is this. You see this there is this central point. I'm just checking if I can do that. There is. Can you see that?
Yeah,
there is. That might be a red dot. So these sort of regions are indicating how much variation exists in this aggregation for this collection of data. So that's closest to what I have in at least in these slides, closest to what I have in terms of uncertainty representation in the statistics. So if this band is very small, it means that this estimate of centrality is quite certain. But where this is sort of very high, it's a very big arc, which means that this is not very certain. But that's a very good question. That's something that we haven't addressed quite well, to be honest. That we have, but we always sort of want to do more on the representations of uncertainty. But in these examples, this is what I have as closest to an uncertain representation. And one other uncertainty, I mean, it's maybe a different approach to uncertainty, is that when you do some computational analysis, and if you see that if you do several runs of the same algorithm, like the clustering example, so if you have multiple clusterings of the same data, and then you see that for some points, for some samples, let's say in the clustering example that I presented, if you see the same group of patients being clustered all the time at the same group, then that's a sort of a sign of that. That's a sort of a certain result. That's as I said, that's probably it.
Okay. Can you turn off your screen share for a second so that we can see your face? Other questions?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I have one question related to this visual summary example at the beginning. The first part would be, it's obvious that your primary focus is on space, and you let the user define this trajectory, and that time is only secondary. And my question would be, is that always the case that there is this trade-off between time and space, and you need to focus on either one of them? That's the first part. The part is when you look at the small model.
I mean, I lose some of your question, Mark.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, but just the last bit.
Okay. And the second part of the question was, if we look at these small multiples showing these trajectories for different attributes, you have 41 in that case. Did you try to look for similarities between those attributes, like clustering them?
Okay. So first question, if I got it correctly, so you say that the focus is on space first, but also you might want to look at time, but you're asking whether the focus could be on time, right? In the beginning, and then.
Yes, if it's always this trade-off that you need to focus on one and the second one is just secondary then. Yes.
Yeah, that's definitely a good comment. I mean, we tried to sort of build some theoretical framework around it and try to make it a bit more general in the paper. In the paper, there's always this aspect of focus, of like your initial focus, what you vary, and then what you sort of compare against. So we if I can remember it correctly, I think we mentioned the first axis of, I think we mentioned that it's an axis of variation. In those examples, the axis of variation is space. So you, by just drawing a sort of a line through geography, you say, I'm interested along this space. But of course, similarly, as you say, this is a very good point, you should be able to sort of draw a line, let's say, across time, a time period that's sort of interesting for you, and all the statistics, all the comparisons might be done as taking that as a basis. So we sort of vary that as a varying, as a defining basis. And we had examples in that paper where we changed the varying axis. So it was like space was one example. The other example was we varied the scale we look at things. So we look at the statistics in let's say in London, or you could just look at the whole country or the whole UK, etc. So we schematically varied those, interactively varied those. So that was another axis of variation. And we haven't implemented time, but this was one of the things that we discussed, that it should be able to do that. And for your second question, which is, can you remind me again?
Yes, familiarity of these small multiples, those tiny plots that you have. Did you try to cluster them or find similarity?
Yes. Yeah. At the moment, initially we just ordered them according to similarity. So we compute a similarity matrix between them, and then we sort of have this sort of, we observed that there were some clusters that are sort of popping up immediately visually. But we haven't done the clustering, but that's definitely something that should be there, because that's something that our collaborators want, because but we haven't done that yet. But they always want sort of groups of correlated variables or groups of related variables. That's important for them, especially in this recent project. They want to know the groups of variables that are closely related with each other, so that they can select good representatives from each of these groups. But they're always after proxies for certain aspects in sort of from these variables. So yes, that's a very good extension, a very good next step that we want to take.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions, then let's thank the speaker again. Thanks, Chatay.
Thank you.
And our next talk is on 26th of April. It's Daniel Weiskopf from University of Stuttgart. He has a visualization group there, which mostly focuses on graph visualization, but he's also a very established German professor. And I guess this concludes our talk. And thank you, Chatay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.